you don't really have the luxury anymore of like when I was the principal, which to date myself is, well, it's March, so we're going to put the newsletter out on green paper because it's St. Patrick's Day. It's going to have a clover on it. It's going to talk about this. It's going to be one time a month that everybody gets all the information. It's not the way the world works anymore.
We are surrounded by content. Content shapes who we follow, how we lead, what we buy, and even what we believe. Welcome to the Content Generation Podcast, a Class Intercom production where we focus on the stories that come to life in schools all over the world. We highlight the students, educators, and communities who share the content that shapes our future. Well, welcome to the Content Generation Podcast. I am Ben Pankinen, and I am joined with Dr. Jill Johnson. And Jill, it is an exciting few episodes we have here coming up, but this episode is in particular really exciting because we're talking a little bit with Chad Stevens from ParentSquare about a lot of the future of EdTech, but we get to explore a lot of the past with EdTech and a lot of emerging things that Chad really has embraced throughout his career, which is a fascinating career and really exciting to talk with him. Jill, I know you've met and chatted with Chad quite a few times.
Yeah, Chad's such a great guy, and we share that, have that shared history in education, which makes it always fun. I think with Class Intercom and ParentSquare too, we just have such similar missions, and in the same way, Chad and I do too. So it's really fun to be in that space and think about how we can help move education forward and help all the stakeholders surrounding that really be a part of that district mission.
Well, Jill, one of the things that we get to talk with Chad at quite length about is really where his North Star comes from. And I know that it's so similar in alignment with the way we feel about education. And that is that it starts with the student. It starts with things in a classroom. Jill, you actually were in some classrooms this week. You were with a bunch of students. Tell me a little bit about what that was like being in the classroom, working with students.
Yeah, so it's always a joy to go back to that. I was a classroom teacher for 17 years, but this last week I got to go visit one specific student who's a special needs student, but he's creating all the graphic content for his school. So every time there's an activity coming, he gets an alert. He's in a class. He creates it. He takes a lot of pride in it. He always wants his name attached to it, and his teacher does that. If she forgets, he's always a little bit, getting on her about that, which is really a fun way to razz her too. But it's just awesome to see that joy. We also had a big group of students in our office this last week learning about social media and then practicing it. And it's just so fun to see their creativity and their questions, and they're coming at everything from just a unique vantage point. And so it's always a thrill for me to be able to go back to those roots.
Well, I think what's so fun to see is that Chad and his team at ParentSquare really are leading in this genre of applications for schools that is an education communication tool, right? It's not just ed tech, but it's also around communication, but really coming back to that component that really it is about education. And there's things we can be doing to actually educate students and really connect their voice to these great outcomes for better communication. I'm excited for you to listen to the interview with Chad Stevens.
Can't wait.
Well, welcome back to the Content Generation Podcast. I've been looking forward to this one for a while. My friend Chad Stevens from ParentSquare is joining with us today. Chad, it's great to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I'm excited to chat.
Well, we've caught up at a number of conferences recently and have talked about a lot of the different things that are happening within ParentSquare. And obviously, a more recent announcement is our partnership between Class Intercom and ParentSquare. So full disclosure there, we're big fans of what you're doing over at ParentSquare. But I think there's a lot of folks in school PR that would really benefit from getting to know you and your background. So I'm excited to dive into a little bit of where you've come in from education on the kind of other side of the table before joining ParentSquare. What were the roles you held in education before this? What got you here?
I don't want to take up the whole podcast. It's been an awesome career, and sometimes I look back and think, what? Wow, how did you end up doing marketing and strategy for an awesome company like ParentSquare? But yeah, I started off as a teacher. I was in Seabrook, Texas, elementary school, and uh, down in Clear Lake area of Texas, which is down by NASA. It was super fast growth in the late '90s. Quickly found myself in administration as an administrator at a pretty young age, in my late 20s. I think I was 27 or 28 when I had my first assistant principal job, and and then found my way into technology. Really, um, my career kind of paralleled technology. If I think back in 1996 was the year that I think President Clinton talked about the education superhighway in one of his State of the Union addresses, and that's my first year teaching. And so my career kind of paralleled like this. Oh wow, there's a computer lab at our school now. Oh wow, there's a class being taught in a computer lab. Oh, there's a computer in the class. All the way through the pieces. So I ended up going into technology as a director of instructional technology. So running all the PD and things for Clear Creek ISD, which is a large school district, about 40,000 kids. I joke sometimes Clear Creek sounds kind of small, but it's
Right.
a large school district in the suburbs of Houston. And then a few months in, the chief technology officer called me in and said, "Hey, I've got some bad news. My husband was transferred and we're moving." And I was like, "Well, gosh, I'm going to get a new boss, and what am I going to do?" And the next words were, "Yeah, and they want you to be the interim chief technology officer." And so all of a sudden I was the CTO of, I think at the time, like the 25th largest school district in Texas. And I had a lot to learn. So, um, we must have done something right, because we did a lot of good stuff. We launched our first virtual school. We really, we really brought it back to like, well, this department's about the kids. It's not about the tech.
Mm.
And, one day phone rang and it was Dell Computers. Asked me if I would be willing to leave, K-12 to go be a consultant. And after thinking about it, I kind of took that leap into private sector. So it really wasn't like I was looking. And then went from there to CDW. I was their chief education strategist, to AWS, to their cloud business, and then on to ParentSquare. So now I joke that now I'm just an old business guy that's grown ed tech businesses. It's been a minute since I think I left the school district in 2010. So it's been 14 years. So equal 14 years in public sector, 14 years in private sector. So here we are. So that's me.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So you've spent your time both in the technology side and the education side, and now you're leading things at ParentSquare in a few different capacities. What is your role at ParentSquare?
So I'm the chief strategy and marketing officer. So I came into ParentSquare 3 years ago as our first chief strategy officer. We were an up and coming smaller company. We had about 40 people. We were just starting to kind of scale and kind of take off with growth. Um, Starting August of last year, I took on marketing, and we look at it a little different ways. We really have three pieces. So there's traditional marketing, digital marketing, all those pieces, all the social you see online, all those types of campaigns. We actually have another separate group just for advocacy and events. You've probably seen Parent Square an event. We do about 170 a year. It's a whole team, small but mighty team, a team of 3 or 4 people that do all of that. Those run those events, and then customer advocacy, which is our advisory council, and really growing out and helping our customers that talk about us in the market. And then the third piece, which I'm really proud of, is what we call product education. So really launching, we had a really robust training team that did amazing work with teachers and helping people use ParentSquare, but we've added on the internal piece. So helping our team understand ParentSquare has been new. So really like customer education and company education, and that team's really doing great work. And it helps us to align marketing, what our customers are hearing, the customer input, and all those pieces. So I think it's a really cool flywheel to have at the company.
That's great. That's great. So when we start thinking about where you've moved, and you sort of said in your very first job there that you moved into a role where you had to remind yourself and remind the team that it was about education, it's about the students, it wasn't just about the technology. Are you finding that to be to continue to be somewhat of a north star for you in your role at Parent Square?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, I think any job, you know, there's been moments where you tend to go in different directions, but like the mission of helping families, the mission of helping kids, the mission of student success is first and foremost, and it's really one of the reasons why Parent Square was a place I was interested in coming, 3 years ago to work. Is just helping families. We know that there's 50 years of research that says families that are engaged in their kids' education, their kids do better, they attend more, they graduate more, they go to college. It's all these things, right? So I think 100%, staying focused on that mission is super helpful. And I think if you ever really lose that north star in a business of your customer, that's when things really go south really
Yeah.
quick.
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so you gotta know your customer. So
Yeah. I love that. So when you're starting to think about what Parent Square is known for, and we sort of know a little bit of this from being around Parent Square at conferences and some of the software and things like that. But you play a unique role in the development of content, which is of course what we're about on this podcast. But the sort of role for school PR is changing. And so
right,
how are you seeing that role changing for school
right.
PR?
I mean, I think school PR went through. I'm pretty new to the school PR space, and going to all the awesome SPRA events, where I see you at all the time.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think they've gone through like a renaissance, right? I mean, I think during COVID, not to bring up bad times, but the district really leaned on them, and now I think there's a couple of things I see going on. I think as schools pay more attention to their brand, I think like this kind of idea of like visual storytelling, infographics, interactive things, how to promote the school, how to promote the school brand, as there's more competition is a huge deal. Um, I think also because of tools like Parent Square, where you're starting to know more information, more data about the families you're communicating with, messaging is becoming more targeted. I like, you know, do I really need to know every single thing about everything when my kid's in X, Y, and Z things? And
Mm.
I think sometimes schools that don't have a tool like Parent Square, they just blast out everything and they're like, well, we sent it to you. So you certainly should have read it versus a tool like Parent Square where you can actually measure some of the engagement, you see the data, and you can be really targeted, in terms of classroom or activities and things like that. And I think last, like, which I think is really cool that I'm seeing, is like more student centered stories, really authentic stories, stories about real life experiences that students are having and real learning that's really like authentic and relatable. And I think in my mind, that's why the class intercom partnership's really cool. I know you guys have a big hand in helping kids get a voice. And I mean, the kids or the students tell the story of the school better than anybody, right? And and they can be very granular in terms of their experience. So I think those are kind of the big three that I can think of that are kind of changing the landscape a bit.
You mentioned separating those out. I know that's a big thing that you're focused on. Is like we don't want to communicate the same thing to every sort of audience, right? I don't know if you
Yeah.
even call them audiences. You talk about parents, and obviously that's in the name. I don't know how you talk about that, but I'd love to explore that. Like how do you talk about like when we think about it as sort of communications or marketing, whatever it is, right? Like we're communicating, we're sort of like blasting things out. How do you speak about that? In terms of how I tailor a message to individuals.
Well, I mean, I think the first thing is you have to have the data to know what they're interested in, right? So like, what they've signed up for, and kind of what they're into. I can, I have a junior in high school, so he's in, pretty normal boy. He's in football, he's in baseball, he's got a lot going on, but he's not in band. My other son was in band, and my other son was in track, and my other son, did certain type of volunteering work, and the one. And so when I get a big message about, make sure you come to, this National Honor Society event, not to bag on my kid, he's not in it. So
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I kind of turn off that message and be like, well, it doesn't, like, I immediately think it doesn't mean anything to me. And I think
Mm,
where we're really going in this world is, if you're really going to engage families, you're going to have to get really granular, because there's a grandparent that's raising their grandchild that, maybe really tech shy. There's super busy parents that, that really don't have time for anything, and we allow for things like, digest at the end of the day. And there's super crazy volunteer parents that want to be in everything, and they do want everything, and they want to know what everything is. And so you don't really have the luxury anymore of, like, when I was the principal, which, to date myself, is, well, it's March, so we're going to put the newsletter out on green paper because it's St. Patrick's Day. It's going to have a clover on it. It's going to talk about this. It's going to be one time a month that everybody
yeah.
gets all the information. It's not the way the world works anymore. It was a more simple time when I was a principal, maybe,
Yeah.
but now every day we've got to know something about what's going on around March and spring break and St. Patrick's Day and the different activities. And so you just have to be, a lot more targeted. And I guess I would add, you've got all these competing things, right? The parents have social media, they have their work, they have a smartphone in their pocket, and so just a lot going on. And so the economy is like competing for their attention. And if you don't have their attention, they may leave your school. Their kids may not be as successful. So it can snowball.
I appreciate there's a lot of richness to what you said there. And I think even as a parent, as a community member, there are certain times where a community relations messages me and I'm almost offended because I'm not in
Yeah,
there, whatever it was, right?
yeah,
Maybe it was prior to becoming a parent and I'd get messages about being a parent. I'm like, I'm not one, right? Like, I don't I'm not even, I don't fit any of your description. Like, you're sending me something. And now I could receive that same message because now that I'm in that bucket, right? I might receive
yep, for
that
sure.
entirely differently. So yeah, I appreciate the way you're addressing that, and I think that tailored messaging is really good. When we think about the nature of content and content creation, how are you seeing the nature of content creation changing from a technical perspective? Obviously, we've heard a few things about AI in the last year. Seems like that might be changing a few things,
There
but
may be a little content going on with AI,
yeah,
just maybe a
yeah.
little. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think when it comes, if I can kind of frame this in terms of like the way we think about it at ParentSquare, like, I think in this really complex world, you're just trying to create simplicity.
Mm,
And so the way we think about simplicity is consolidation. And so, kind of the first victory is, can I just get the parents to go to one spot to pay for things, to get your newsletter, to sign your permission slips, to get your to take your phone calls. I think, I think that's like, if you can get to that, like, you're like 90% there. Just getting to one spot, because then you can be like, well, this is where we communicate, this is where we collaborate, and we can go from there. I think the other big thing you talked about with AI is really like, you know, how the way we think about AI is, how can we use it to make a teacher's life easier, more efficient, an administrator's life easier, more efficient? Like, the one thing that you can't buy is time. And as a former teacher, your time's limited. Your days are very compacted. You don't have a lot of, there's been a lot of research lately about the lack of planning time. And so, like, if you can take something like a newsletter, and which we have, and have just done an upgrade of into what we call Studio Editor, where you can create like these really awesome newsletters very quickly. You can, make, things that are very engaging. I think that's a big deal. And I think, where AI comes in is, can it help you rewrite posts? Can it be more, obviously, we've all seen fixed spelling errors if we all have Gmail, right?
Yeah.
But, one of the things we're looking at is, What about translations? Like when you make communication really easy, like we do, almost like a text, people start to get more less and less formal,
Mm.
and a teacher goes to write a, really what feels like a text to a parent, and maybe it doesn't translate well. We're looking at things like, can we run it through AI to fix the readability of the reading level before it goes to a translator, to make sure that we're not you know causing confusion for a parent. So there's just all these little things that you can do, um, to try to make the content a little bit more engaging, I guess.
Yeah.
Hopefully that helps. Hopefully that's on track with what you're asking.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Because I think we're all looking for, hey, is it an efficiency play, or does it help me be smarter? And I think you're addressing both of those, right? Like in some cases,
Yeah.
it just makes me be more efficient, and in other cases, maybe it does something that I, as a human, wasn't capable of doing. Right? I can't translate into a lot of
Yeah.
languages. I don't know how that tone and voice is going to translate when it does move into a language that I'm less comfortable with.
I think it is both. I mean, for me, I use it as both. I think it's a way to aggregate a ton of data really fast.
Yeah,
Get to the main points of a super large article or something, or some website that I'm trying to learn, but also, that saved you time too. And I think if we can continue to do that, um, it'll be great. And I think ed tech companies internally can use AI also to be more efficient. And at the end of the day, being more efficient, is good for customers, because it means that we keep our costs down because we're
yeah.
not spending as much. And so I think, that's an important part for us too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we feel the same. So when we're thinking about Parent Square, when I think about Parent Square, I can't help but think of some of the things you've been doing lately and how you've been growing to a much larger scale. When you said you were 40 people, I think when I first met you, there was probably less than 40 people at Parent Square, and we were talking about how your role was changing in that. And now this is at a much bigger scale. I don't even know how to put into words the scale that you're reaching, or how many parents or families. I don't know what the metric is that you use to describe that now.
Well, we're much larger than 40 people now. I don't know if we disclose the exact number, but
Yeah,
plenty of people across a lot of places. But yeah, I mean, we touch about 17 million families right now. We touch families in all 50 states. So I think, that's it's a it's a big responsibility. I think
yeah.
we're taking care of family engagement in a lot of places, and it's really meaningful to families. So the scale is pretty, it's overwhelming sometimes, just to think that where we've grown to.
So obviously, like the precision has to change when you hit 17 million families, right? Like there's things you can do when you're talking to a family, right? Like I think about this in the context of like you could have a parent teacher conference, or back when you were in your principal days, right? Like you could have a small number of parents physically in person. The communication that matters there versus the communication that matters at scale there with 17 million, that's a lot different responsibility, right? And yeah,
Yeah, I mean, our engineering team, does a credible job. I'm in awe of how stable things are at that scale. When you think about the amount of app notifications and text messages and emails. Like I used to know the exact number that came out of the system every day, but I don't know that anymore, but it's a lot. And they do an amazing job. And again, it is a responsibility. And then you also get into emergency notifications. Those
yeah.
certainly are critical. When it's time, when there is an emergency, um, getting those out quickly, and efficiently and fast is something that we're really proud of too.
So now that you've gotten some scale, right, and you're at that size where it's 17 million families, I'm still trying to get my mind around that. But as you're thinking about that size, what sort of changes from the delivery of product? What are you able to do now that you couldn't have done 2 years ago?
Uh, well, I mean, I think, we haven't really talked about it much, but, with the acquisition of Remind late last year, we really believe that we have this ability to build like the single most engaging communication platform that exists. Like, so, roughly like 80% of teachers in the United States were using Remind. A large number, obviously, of school districts and administrators using ParentSquare. So I think I would go back to our engineering team. We can do things very quickly, and I would point to the speed at which that we brought together some of the features of Remind and a ParentSquare to me is unprecedented in ed tech. Like we launched voice clips, which is one of the most popular tools that Remind had already in ParentSquare. We've got grouped codes coming in from Remind into ParentSquare already, and those are things that are happening. Really just what 3 months, 3 months since we announced the acquisition. So I'm really proud of the team. I think we can just do things much faster because of the strength of the engineering team. I think the other thing that's cool is it's bringing in more customer voice.
Hmm.
So like it's all a big flywheel in my mind. So I talked earlier about our customer advocacy team at ParentSquare. That team is led by a director that's main job is to make sure we're listening to our customers, and that we're telling them what we're building. We're getting feedback while we're building it, but also before we build it and after we launch it. And so, especially with Remind coming in, we have all these new teacher voices, which I think is just something that we had before, but now we have that at scale. So we're getting great superintendent administrator voice. We're getting PR professionals voice. We're getting teachers voice. If we keep listening to them and then plugging that into our amazing engineering team, what comes out the other side, is super beneficial, to families and schools. So those are some things I think, you have the luxury of as you get a little bit bigger. That being said, we want to act like, I feel like we've maintained the culture that we're small, because I think a lot of acquisitions lately, that well, not even lately. Back when I was a buyer of these
Yeah.
things, there was acquisitions that would happen, and you would see like, companies get very stagnant, and you kind of have paralysis by analysis.
Hmm.
And I think we've tried to really pride ourselves on, no, let's listen, let's act, let's run that experiment, let's get it out in the market, see how people respond to it, and go, and not get too wrapped up in having it perfect, but really solving a problem for a customer. So I'm we're big, but I'm also proud that we've stayed pretty agile. So
Yeah. Yeah, I can appreciate that approach as a buyer of technology, right? Like there's moments where I'm like, I get excited about the company that I'm working with, that they've grown, right? Because their capacity grows. They have a capacity for things that they couldn't have put on their roadmap before. Um, as long as they're taking care of me well, and they're, like you said, coming back to that family, right? They're coming back
yeah,
to the actual North Star. I think that becomes really important as a buyer of technology to know that those things are continuing to happen. So as we think about the speed of innovation in this space, the speed of AI, all of those things, what are you seeing as the next things in education technology coming down the road?
oh man, that's a good one. I think you know when I think about what's coming next, I mean, I think everybody talks about AI, but it's really hard to put AI in a box. I think it's a pretty fundamental thing that's gonna happen. But I think you know I really answer this. I may not be answering this the way you'd like me to, but the way I think about it is these innovations are going to come and go, right? There's always going to be something new in education, and it kind of goes back to this kind of idea of the North Star, right? So like, no matter what, the one thing that we have in education is the family and the student, that's trying, and that we're trying to kind of become a citizen, get out in the world, get a job, all those things. And the way I try to approach that is, if you just stay centered on that, it really doesn't matter what's going to come, because think about all the things that have come. There was netbooks, and then there's been Chromebooks, which were wildly successful. There was one-to-one technology. There was, we're going to have cell phones in schools. Then now we're not going to have cell phones in schools. So I think, one of the hardest parts about being either in ed tech or being the consumer of ed tech is to stay, really focused on why we do stuff. And so if AI, which is the next big thing, fits into the why, like I described earlier, then yeah, go for it, do that. That makes sense. But if it doesn't, don't force it. I think, and I think that's, you could point to things like augmented reality right now, and the new Facebook Meta, or actually the Apple, I don't even know what they're calling them anymore.
Vision,
Yeah,
Oculus,
yeah,
the whole thing.
I'm resisting to add to my Apple ecosystem by buying some of those, but I do own some of those Meta glasses. But the point being is, like, that was like the great thing for a while, but really at scale, is every school going to have those in the next 5 years? Probably not. Could some, for sure, but well, why are you doing that? You might be able to have the same outcome with a whiteboard or a chalkboard, and I think, I even being a CTO, I used to tell people, look, I've seen some of the greatest teachers in the world with a piece of chalk and a green piece of slate that can engage a kid with zero technology. And I've seen, and I've also seen that they can't. And so it really comes back to why you're doing this, what's the pedagogy, how you're teaching it, and all that. And so I don't know. I don't spend a lot of time trying to think about that, because I just know it's going to change. And maybe that's the 28 years of watching that happen. But that's kind of how I answer that question. So
I can
not to
appreciate
dodge
that.
it.
Yeah. Well, I can appreciate that, and I think you're right in moving those things back to that spot and saying, "Hey, like, pedagogy matters regardless of the technology or the platform that we're carrying forward, and we want to make sure that's sound as well." So, Chad, any departing thoughts you'd love to share with the audience?
No, I mean, I think, I think this is an exciting time. I think, you know, when 3 years ago, again, I think family engagement, if you will, it wasn't even necessarily a category of ed tech, right?
Hmm.
There was websites, and there was like kind of mass messaging is what people call them, and maybe some communication tools. But to me, it's really exciting now that there's really a genre, or a category, if you will, of ed techs that are doing this. And at ParentSquare, we obviously think that we have a great product, but it's okay that there's a lot of other products that are doing this too. Because at the end of the day, if we have 17 million families, well, guess what? There's 50 million students in the United States, and we
Yeah.
want them all to have awesome family engagement. Think about how great the education system would be if all 50 million students had engaged families or caretakers around them. And so that's kind of the mission, to keep that going. And it's really exciting, and we're excited about our partnership with Class Intercom. I think there's a lot of cool things that will come from that, and again, it's just a joint mission. And so
Yeah.
we'll learn from each other, and kind of go from there. So
Absolutely appreciate that. I appreciate you joining us in the podcast and sharing a bit of your vision for what's happening within Parent Square, but in the greater part of education. And I think, yeah, being aligned in mission is a really exciting thing for us to see that the way that parents, the community are engaged, really does have an impact on student outcomes. And appreciate your commitment to education and to school communication. Thanks for being on the podcast.
yeah, no worries. It was fun. Appreciate it, Ben.